So this is the question I want to ask today. Have you ever felt guilty, but you weren't sure why? Like there's no specific action that you can point to. You just are carrying around a heavy feeling that you are probably doing something wrong or you are probably wrong. I lived under that sensation for not years, but decades. And it took me a while to even recognize that it was there. And then it took me a little bit while to figure out how to resolve it. So, but there is a name for that. I call it false guilt. I sometimes call it vague guilt because that helps me clarify the difference between, you know, are you guilty? Yes, I did that. I cheated on the Monopoly game with my family. I'm guilty of cheating on the Monopoly game with my family. That's not vague guilt. That is, oh, I said that thing and I shouldn't have said it. I lost my temper with, the person who messed up my order. That is totally different from, oh, I feel like I should do something about this. I feel responsible for this. There's something wrong. This is so common of a feeling that we I see it cropping up everywhere I go. I see it cropping up when I get together with women and they're in the, oh, probably shouldn't do that. Anytime you're saying, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. And that might be an indication that there is some false guilt going on. So it's a trap. So I grew up believing that there was nothing good in me apart from Christ, and that if I did anything good, then it was to God be the glory because I can't do anything good. And if I failed, well, that was 100% on me. And even as a little kid, I kept on thinking that doesn't seem logical that if it's good, it's God. And if it's not good, it's me. It almost feels like it felt like I'm not taking responsibility over the whole of my life. It felt like I was, kind of like passively in it. I'm not explaining this piece well, but anyway, in this live, I want to talk about how false guilt is a trap, the way that I grew up under it, which made me then realize how it was not helping. I hope that when I share my story, that it will help you see yourself. And then it's fascinating to me how I have been invited to embrace false guilt by the super conservative, religious, far, far right, very, very conservative side of my upbringing, and also by the super progressive, far left side of society. The commonality between those two positions freaked me out. If we're just going to speak it literally, it was like, wait, this is so weird. This is disorienting that I am getting the same message coming from two opposite ends of the spectrum of, politically speaking or culturally speaking or maybe even religiously speaking. But it's because it's a lie. But it's a pernicious lie because it is based on half truths. So there's just enough truth mixed in with it that makes it feel like it's completely true. And if we adopt it, it's a trap that will hold us back for the rest of our life. It will rob our confidence. It will rob us of our purpose, rob us of intention, and it will make us reactive versus responsive in our life. So we'll always be feeling like we're on the defense rather than doing something bold and great with our lives. So, in case we're meeting for the very first time, my name is April Bragg. And on this channel, April Bragg About Life, I teach timeless truths to help women live, love, and lead with confidence. And I go live on Wednesdays to talk some of these things out. And we hit a bunch of things. We'll talk about mindset, we'll talk about maybe faith matters sometimes, we'll talk about the practical matters. I also run a membership, Create a Home That Takes Care of Itself. So sometimes I'm talking about decluttering, or sometimes I'm talking about how to, as an entrepreneur, how to balance your time so that you can grow a business while also feeling like you're making room for all the other priorities in your life. Broad range of topics. And in fact, this is where, if you are joining us live, I would love to hear, out of all those things that I just mentioned, is there any topic that specifically keep get your interest, and then that'll give me direction on what other videos to create. So, and if you have any questions that come up, put those in the chat. I would love to hear it. But if you're catching us live, tell us where you are coming from so I can say hi. I'm from Bella Vista, Arkansas. That's where we're currently located. I grew up in the Midwest. I moved to Florida for a while. I've lived in Africa. I lived in France. I've lived a few places. I've moved a lot, which is why I'm very good about talking about decluttering our lives to make room for better things than housework. But let's get back to the topic today of the false guilt is a trap and how to break free. And I encourage you to get the most out of this video. Instead of trying to remember all the things, listen for the one thing that speaks to you the most. I call this the aha moment. And when something resonates really strongly and you think, I don't want to forget that, I encourage you to go ahead and put it in the chat. My aha moment from this video was, and that way it'll do two things. It'll help you remember it better so that you'll get the greatest impact from the time that you invested in watching this video, which, by the way, thank you very much for investing your precious time on joining me live or watching the replay. I mean, I do not take that for granted. And I want it to be a wise use of your time. And also, you make a huge contribution to somebody else, because that chat then encourages somebody else or helps somebody else, or maybe it intrigues somebody else and they watch the video and they get their own unique aha out of this video. So let's get back to the false guilt as a trap. Okay, so I was saying that when I was growing up, I grew up independent fundamental Baptist. And, it's funny, when I came to God, I did not have a denomination. I did not have a religion. I just had this heavy sense of, on the one hand, the world was this amazing place and it was beautiful. And there was this sense that there is something greater than me out there. And on the other hand, my personality was, what happened? I feel so kind of scared, unsafe. Like, what happens to me when I die? And I was a pretty young kid asking those questions. And so very early on, when I heard the message that there's a loving God that created the world, created you in the world, and you have a sin nature, but God sent his only son to take to pay for that sin nature, to take the punishment that your sin would require. And so he became your redeemer. And if you'll just accept him, accept that free gift, then you won't have to worry someday about paying for your sin nature. Okay, now that's how I understood it. That's how I think I understood it when I was 6 or 7. And to me, it was like, oh my goodness, this sounds amazing. Somebody wants to give me an awesome gift of eternal life, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. And it all makes sense to me because the world seems like a wonderful place, and a loving God who created me and loves me and has a plan for my life. I loved it. I loved that messaging. It really resonated deep with me. And so I was all in. And then I am all in on it. So I'm like, how do you be a good Christian? And so I absorbed everything I possibly could about everything that I was taught about what it means to be a good Christian. And some of it was very helpful, no doubt about it. Some of it was not. But there was this sense of because Christ did everything for you, you're the first message I heard, this is what's weird. The first message I heard was, you don't have to do anything because Christ already did it for you. So that sounds like a free gift. The second message I heard is, you're not capable of doing anything good. And you're worthless apart from Christ. That message wasn't so good. And it's not true either. Even the Bible says you are wonderfully and fearfully made, and that there are desires in your heart that God plants. And so, this idea that we are worthless is not a beneficial idea. It's yes, we have sinned. Yes, we have a sin nature. Yes, there's a part of us that struggles to do good. And yes, there's a part of us that sometimes really struggles to do what we know is not good. You know, um, gossip, backstab, just feel so good in the moment to get our revenge, even though we know that it's also not good for our future. That conscience piece. So I'm going a little bit deeper than I needed to go on this. Hold on just one second. But the intense focus on the fact that I wasn't perfect and needed a savior. So instead of, there being a gratefulness that all of that was forgotten, the fact that I'm a sinner, but now God sees me as a saint now because I have accepted, Jesus' free gift of salvation. I am now a saint. That was not emphasized. It was you're a sinner, be careful, watch out for your sin. That kind of messaging made me afraid to trust my own judgment. It made me question whether I had anything of value to contribute. This is why we know it's not actually a helpful or a fully true message. And it kept me stuck in guilt instead of stepping out of my purpose. So, this is a message actually from the enemy that he likes to use to keep us helpless and hopeless and afraid of stepping out with boldness and doing what God has put in our hearts to do. Okay? You're probably wrong. You're probably guilty. You can do nothing apart from Christ. And the goal is to never mess up. The goal is not to never mess up. The goal is to run our race with patience. And if we trip, it's to get up and learn from what tripped us up and get going again. The goal is not to mess up. It's so important that you hear it. So I was also taught that if you feel guilty, then that's true. You need to pay attention to that, which is really curious because they also say don't live by your feelings. And that's not true. There's all kinds of false guilt. We can feel guilty for the place that we were born. We can feel guilty that we have it better than somebody else. We can feel guilty that we're not struggling the way another person is struggling. Do you understand? That's all false guilt. Okay, that does not mean that because you're guilty, you should do something about it. That when we feel guilty and when we are obsessed with our guilt, we feel stuck. We feel like we get trapped in the comparison mode. So that was how I grew up feeling guilty. And then I'm going to share how I overcame it in just a second. But I did overcome it. I worked on it very, very hard. And one of the ways that I overcame it was I got very, very specific. Like if I was going to feel guilty, I needed to define exactly what am I feeling guilty about. Did I actually do something, or am I just feeling vague guilt? What is the specific? There is a difference between condemnation and conviction. Guilt just gives us this vague sense of condemnation. Conviction is, ooh, I shouldn't have said that because I was feeling a little angry when I said it. And because, or I shouldn't have done that because I was trying to, uh, I was trying to defend something, and it was for my ego. Okay. So I grow up and I've dealt with the guilt. I'm starting to walk in freedom and confidence. I become a life coach. And now I'm introduced into this new world where I find out that all these other women who have not, mostly women, who have not grown up the way I've grown up are still struggling with the thing that I used to struggle with. And I was like, what is going on? What is this? It was a new guilt. It was about identity, a new version of original sin. This time, not based upon the fact that we were born, descendants of Adam and Eve, but it's based upon skin color. You are inherently racist because of your whiteness. You benefit from oppression, whether you know it or not. Your only moral option is to continually repent for the privilege that you didn't ask for. It is your job to shut up and let other voices speak. Not based upon what you did, but based upon your skin color. That is a problem. That is why I'm calling it original sin. It's not something you did, it's something that you are. That's the problem. If it's something we are, if we are inherently wrong, then the best thing for us to do is to obliterate our existence. Okay. This is why we know that this is not a message that comes from God, because it leads to annihilation. So it's the same guilt trap, it's just a different language. And it's the same identity based shame, it's just a different doctrine. So, as the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. This is why I am so grateful for my rather guilt laden, restrictive upbringing, because it actually allowed me to see the trap when it came around the second time. So I had been here before. I knew what this was, and I just wasn't going to live under that yoke again. The Bible says that Jesus said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I've just decided that there's a litmus test in my life, and that is, if it doesn't feel easy and if it doesn't feel light, then question whether it's from God. Anyway, it's a really, really shortcut in my brain, if that makes any sense. So the problem with false guilt, here's where the truth and the false or the truth and the lie get mixed up. Not all guilt is bad. Actual real conviction is very clear, it's very specific, and it leads to action. Oh, I said something that I shouldn't have. I need to apologize. Uh, as a kid, I took something I shouldn't have. I need to return it and apologize. It's very specific. Conviction is specific. If you go into a courtroom, you should be convicted very specifically of very specific crimes, not just, nobody's perfect, so we're just going to say that you're guilty. You're probably guilty. In fact, oh my gosh, I remember hearing this one time. Well, maybe you didn't deserve these demerits, but there's a time when you did something that you didn't get demerits that you probably deserve. So you just need to let it go. It's like, that is false guilt. That is condemnation. That is not conviction. That's wrong. Okay. False guilt is vague, it's heavy, and it keeps us stuck. We cannot be excited about our life if we are apologizing for our life. Conviction says you did this, make it right. False guilt says you probably did something wrong, feel bad about it. So instead of doing something, and especially feeling guilty about something that you have no control over. For example, you have no control over, I see a lot of people that feel guilty about their status in life. Like, maybe I was born maybe I was born in a great country and I feel guilty that I'm, that other people don't have my blessings. This is crazy to me. This is how the enemy steals our blessings, is by making us feel guilty about them, instead of recognizing that if this is something that God created as a circumstance in my life, then maybe he wants me to use it to his honor and glory. And I cannot possibly do that while I'm feeling guilty about it and thinking that everybody else needs exactly the same situation that I have to have a good life. The truth is this: we all have good things and bad things that we were born into, that we were handed, natural abilities that we have, uh, natural tendencies that hold us back that we have. And they can all work for good. We know that all things work together for good according to those that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. As in, boy, I'm getting worked up. Sorry, you guys, let me tone it down. As in, what we call good may not actually be good. Having a privileged, how we call it, privileged upbringing, being born with a spoon in your mouth, the way I used to say it when I was a kid, might make you have a low tolerance for taking risk, the types of risks that you need to take to achieve something in life. Versus, being born from a humble background might make you more willing to go after something because you have this idea that there's nothing to lose and everything to gain. Maybe you have more grit, maybe you have more resilience. I remember I had a teacher one time that said, I have a photographic memory. He goes, it's been a curse. He goes, because I didn't learn how to work hard. I just relied upon that. And he goes, it held me back. And I was like, whoa, fascinating. What we think might be good may not be good, but we can take anything, whether it's an asset or whether it seems like an obstacle, and turn it to our benefit through wisdom, through practical application, through studying and seeing, what do I need to do to overcome this? I think it was Ryan Holiday that wrote the book. I didn't read it, but I just love the title. The obstacle is the way. Overcoming the obstacle gives us the strength to go forward in life. So conviction says you did this, make it right. False guilt says just feel bad about it. It has us actually not doing anything. Conviction leads to repentance and change. False guilt leads to anxiety and paralysis. It's terrible. And the biggest trap is that when we assume that all guilt is valid, we stop questioning where it's coming from. And that's when we get stuck in cycles of over apologizing, saying sorry for things just constantly, maybe even things that we didn't even do, overcompensating, as in working harder to prove that we're good enough. That was what trapped me because I had this vague sense of guilt. It's like, well, then I should just go ahead and do it. I feel guilty that I'm not helping them when I probably could. So let me just say yes. Never checking in, is this something that makes sense for me to do with what I think that God is calling me to do with my life, or with the purpose or the priorities that God has given me, or the gifts that God has given me? Does it even make sense? I used to feel guilty about not signing up for throwing more baby showers. When I finally got a little bit older and a little bit wiser, I realized there was nothing in my giftedness. I mean, I'm capable of using my organizing skills to pull together all the pieces of a baby shower, but that is not my giftedness. That entertaining aspect, the part where it makes it fun and everybody wants to come and everybody, None of that is in me. I'll make sure there's enough food. I'll make sure the place is clean, but I don't have an eye for decorating. I don't have a good idea of what's fun and I'm an introvert on top of that. But false guilt had me overcompensating, saying yes to things that God had never gifted me with, and I didn't even enjoy. Or, and this is another one that I fell in, was overthinking, constantly second guessing myself, never trusting my instinct. So if I said something, I felt bad because I probably shouldn't have said it. If I didn't say something, I felt bad because I probably should have said something. So then I would say something, then I feel, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said. Overthinking. Okay. So out of those three, over apologizing, overcompensating, or overthinking, do any of those resonate with you? For me, it was definitely the overcompensating and the overthinking. But so put it in the chat below if either of those resonate with you. And we were not designed to live like that. We were designed to enjoy the freedom that God has created for us. We're designed to enjoy abundance that this world is naturally gifted with. And then we are designed to live out our purpose in a way that makes our lives and our neighbors' lives better. And as Christians, we're designed that purpose is going to align with thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, as in making earth more heavenly, which, whether you're a Christian or not, we all know that heaven is a term for beautiful, amazing place. So, what do you do when you feel vague guilt? First of all, let me tell you what not to do when you feel vague guilt. Don't assume it's valid. Just because you feel guilty does not mean you are guilty, regardless of what my preacher told me. If there's no clear wrongdoing, don't accept the weight of it. Don't start apologizing for random things. This is not an apology. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. That's a sentence that we use to cover our bases. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Okay, no, that's false guilt. That is insecurity. Try to keep yourself from saying that. You could ask, is there something I did wrong? And then you get feedback, and then you get to decide, do I see that as a wrong or would I say that again? Somebody says, well, I didn't like that you said this. And I remember I was like, okay, now let me sit. And it's like, oh, wow, I can't apologize for that because I would literally say it again. Like, even though I'm very, very uncomfortable that somebody is disagreeing with me and didn't like what I said because have such a tendency to people please. Um, I also have to recognize that that's actually what I would have said in the situation if the situation repeated. Okay. So I'm sorry if I did something wrong. No, that's vague guilt. Don't let it turn into self criticism, that overcompensating. You should be doing more. You should be better. You should be helping other people out. You should give all of anything that you have, you should give it away. I, I actually see this. People, they're uncomfortable with the possessions and the things that they have. They're uncomfortable having money. And so anytime they get it, they look to give it away, never questioning whether or not they're supposed to be stewards of it in a different way, something that brings more fruit. So, without clear action, it's just a mental spiral, that self criticism. And don't overcompensate with busyness. Don't feel like you have to prove yourself. I know a lot of women who, because of vague guilt, they just keep themselves busy to the point of exhaustion and then think, well, I think I've done enough, or I hope I've done enough because I just can't do anymore. I'm too exhausted. They're letting their exhaustion tell them that it's okay to stop and rest versus taking ownership and responsibility and choosing, wait, what am I going to pour myself into? And when am I going to stop? When is it good enough? What are my tasks? What are my things to do versus what are the things that I'm just doing because better safe than sorry, as in better safe to have done it than sorry that I got criticized or sorry because I feel guilty because I didn't do enough. Those are all the things I don't want you to do with a vague guilt. So, those are symptoms of vague guilt. Here's what you can do very, very specifically. Ask, make yourself answer the question, what did I do wrong? If I feel guilty vaguely, what is it that I'm accusing myself of? There is so much gold in that question. Do not shy away from that question. You Because that's when it comes up. What's unconscious starts coming up, and then we can start saying, but is that even true? Because not everything that comes up is going to be true. It's going to be some false accusations. If there's no clear answer, it's a false guilt. Even God convicts specifically, never vaguely. He's never like, you're probably wrong because you are a sinner. It's like, no, he went specifically, sent Nathan to David. You specifically sinned in this way, which is very ironic because apparently David wasn't even feeling guilty. I guess he felt justified in what he had done. So check the fruit. This is what I love, okay? We got into this conversation in a Bible study that I went to yesterday where they were saying, sometimes it's hard to be a Christian. And I was thinking, wait, that doesn't seem right. And I think it's actually easier. It's hard to not be aligned with Christ, but it's actually easier to be aligned with Christ. So true conviction from God brings clarity and freedom. As in, there's a moment that you feel convicted, like, oh, I can see it clearly now. I shouldn't have done that. But it gives you clarity of, oh, this is what I can do to make it right. This is what I need to do going forward. It gives us freedom, as in when we're very certain of what is the wrongdoing, we can make it right and do better going forward. This is why I call it, running a race. We fall down. Well, we shouldn't then just sit down and feel guilty and say, I shouldn't have fallen. We were running a race and I fell and I can't believe it. I'm such a terrible person. I'm the worst there is. No, no. No, it's like, oh, what tripped me? Ah, this tripped me up. I need to create some kind of structure that'll help me recognize that. So maybe it won't trip me up. False guilt brings confusion and heaviness. So, conviction versus false guilt. Are you feeling like clarity and freedom? Or are you feeling confusion and heaviness? And then pray for discernment. I've actually done this before, often. In fact, recently. If I have sinned, show me specifically. Like I'm not seeing it, but you know, because I'll do this a lot of times when I'm talking, like, was I wrong to say that or was I right? And then, I could be false guilt, but is there a better way I could have said it? That's a better question. And if this guilt is not from you, then remove it. But forcing yourself to make it specific is showing you whether it's conviction or it's guilt. And here's the other deal. Here's the biggest thing. Vague guilt keeps us worried about what if I messed up and it slows us down versus us in power and grace and conviction saying, I'm going to walk forward. And if I mess up, I will make it right. That is the difference. So when I was trapped in the false guilt, I was not allowing myself to experience the grace that does come, that covers our sin. So I'm so worried about not messing up that I didn't access grace that God gives when we do mess up. I'm not saying sin on purpose. I am saying that going so carefully and so cautiously and so fearfully through life in the fear of not ever making a mistake was never the goal. The goal was to go out. It goes back to that parable of the three servants to um, when the master gave 5 talents to one guy, 2 talents to another, and 1 talent to the third. And the five and the two went out and did something with it. Now, were they perfect in it? No, because nobody's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. That's not the point. The point is not to stay perfect. The point is to make progress. The point is to do something with our lives. So when they did it, the fruit was they doubled their talents. The five went to 10, the two went to four. The third guy had a totally different perspective. The third guy was like, I'm afraid of making a mistake. My master is a hard, terrible guy. And so he didn't do anything. He hid it. That person, God makes it very clear that was not the point. The point was not to hide it and not do anything. The point was to do something. Okay. If you identify after they ask these questions, is it false guilt? Guess what? It's okay to just let it go. Just say, I'm not going to feel guilty about this. I might be tempted to feel guilty, but I'm going to recognize that it's false guilt. I don't need to feel guilty. By the way, let me say this. Feeling guilty does not prove that you're a good person. I think that's another trap is, well, me feeling bad about something actually means that I'm a good person. And of course, it's natural that we would think that because we all know that, like psychopaths and sociopaths don't feel bad about anything. But that doesn't mean that feeling bad is a marker of that you've done well. No, it's just you might be needlessly feeling bad over something that is not conviction, it's false guilt. So, true, conviction or guilt as we think of it, it should be leading to either repentance or release. If we're stuck in a cycle of vague guilt with no resolution, that is not God, that is a trap. There's a verse in 2 Peter that says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. So if it's creating fear in your life, question whether it's from God. So let me ask you this. Have you ever struggled with false guilt? Do you know why you're struggling with false guilt? Like for me, I recognized, this was actually a big, strong messaging in my youth that I definitely adopted. I can see where it came from. But also, there's a lot of cultural that you should feel. I just can't even tell you how many times I've heard women say, I feel bad that I have so much and other people don't. That is not helping anyone. That is not you seeing what, that is having you focused on sitting in the feeling of feeling bad and spinning and spiraling out on that versus saying, wait, why am I here? Who am I? Whose am I? Why am I still here? What's the good that I'm supposed to do in the world? See, and it's also a scarcity notion. There are people that believe that the world is finite resources, and that if one person has more, then by default, another person has to have less. That's not true. Like if you'll even notice one apple, okay? So we have one apple. Imagine there's one apple. So who gets the apple? Well, maybe we cut the apple in half and two people get the apple. Maybe we take the seeds in the apple and we plant them and the whole world gets an apple when those trees bear fruit. Because that is how abundant it is. When it comes from the seed, it creates abundance. And so when we're looking at just the fruit itself, like the thing that we can see right now, it might seem like it's finite. There's only one apple, but inside the apple is the potential for billions of apples. Think about that. That's just the apple. That's not talking about everything else. So when we think that the world is scarcity, then we only see that there's one apple and not enough for everybody. When we believe that the world is abundant, we say, how can I take these seeds and make them into billions of apples? What are the seeds that I've been given that I could abundantly share with others, that has been uniquely given to me? When we feel bad about our blessings or our seeds, maybe is the way we could think about it, then we're not looking on how to invest them and grow them and have them bear more fruit. No, we're way distracted on how to eat, how to eliminate the disparity between two people. So this is why I'm saying this is just not helpful. The person who feels bad that they have an abundance of drinking water and the rest of the world is lacking, while they're feeling bad about it, they're just going to feel guilty while they drink their water. Versus the person who's like, I recognize that maybe one of the greatest blessings I've ever had in my entire life is clean drinking water. Wow, I want to be the person that makes a difference in bringing clean drinking water to the rest of the world. That takes the false guilt and turns it into a mission. That's the power of dropping the false guilt. So maybe the things that you falsely feel guilty the most about might actually be tiny little resonances, tiny little signals of your greater mission, your greater calling, how you're going to make the world a greater place, how you're going to make God's kingdom come so that his will is done on earth as it is in heaven. Imagine that. Imagine if we dropped the false guilt and we stood up in confidence and boldness and conviction and shared what our gifts. We found the way to make the things that we enjoy the most of benefit to the rest of the world. You know, speaking from my side, this is why I make the video, is because I am redeeming some of those things that used to hold me back, and I enjoy the benefit that I receive from breaking down these false beliefs in my own mind while still hanging on to my faith, which, by the way, was no easy task, but so worth the effort. Now I am enjoying the benefit of sharing it with others who may be trapped in the same mindset that I was trapped in. So that's just my example of little seeds that God planted in my heart that I want to share with others. So as we come to the end, let me ask you this. What have you felt false guilt about? And is it possible that it's an indication of maybe your future purpose, your future mission? As in, there is something that it's not for you to feel guilty about. It's for you to expand, for you to increase in the world. Do not ever think that there's any benefit into the world for feeling guilty for who you are, your actual identity as a person. Yes, there is times when we do wrong and we need to make amends, but that is a very clear conviction, very specific to the offense, and we'll be able to see what we could do to make it better and going forward to minimize the chances of that happening again. That's conviction. That's totally different than false guilt. False guilt is about our identity. You are wrong in your core as the way you are, or you're taking on the sins of your father, or because you have more than somebody else has less. The only reason that you might have more because somebody else has less is if you personally went out and stole it. Otherwise, I feel convicted about that and return it fourfold. But You expressing your talents and seeing the doubling of that and the quadrupling of that and the 10xing of that, that is abundance. That is not stealing from anybody. That's recognizing that the world is not an apple. One apple, to have one apple, it has seeds that can become infinite apples. Okay? So don't get stuck on the wrong side of the equation. Don't get trapped in the false guilt, but seek to see, wait, what am I here for? And how am I making the world a better place? Okay? All right. Any questions? Any thoughts? I'm checking the chat right now. Any aha moments that you want to share? I'd love to hear them. Boy, I went long on this one. I apologize for that. I try to keep them to 30 minutes, but this one went long. Okay. Well, it has been a joy to see you. I'll be back next Wednesday with a new topic. And feel free to tell in the chat what any questions you have or any topics you'd like to hear about. And until next week, be grateful for your blessings, not ashamed of them. Okay. And don't assume again that what you see as a burden is not actually a blessing in disguise. Sometimes the thing that we overcome becomes the greatest thing. Like I just said, the teacher who had a photographic memory, but he said it made him lazy and not used to hard work versus, so he's like, it looked like a blessing, but it felt like a curse later on in life. And me saying, boy, it felt like a burden to be raised under such a strict, heavy, legalistic mindset. But it came a blessing because when I overcame it, I, in doing that, felt greater freedom, greater resilience against false messaging that looked like it, but came from the other side of the spectrum. And also gave me an opportunity to help others who are struggling in the same way. So it's hard to judge what they are, but you yourself don't feel guilty for who you are, okay? Make sure that you do not fall into the false guilt trap. All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye.